Good morning, it's 8:30. I'll call the meeting of the County Board of Supervisors to order at this time. And roll call, please. Would you enter your attendance? Okay, we'll start with the invocation, and that'll be with Pastor Don Jeffers. Please rise.
Thank you. Shall we pray? God, our Creator, we thank you for gracing our lives with human community and for providing us with the ancient gift of government. Today we pray for our meeting, for all the supervisors present, for all the community leaders who've come, everyone with a vision and dream for how to make St. Croix County a lovely place, a beautiful place, a place where everyone is safe and welcome. And so, Lord, we ask that you grace their work this morning and bless them with real wisdom. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Before the Pledge of Allegiance, let's have just a moment of silence, please, in remembrance of those who lost their lives in Pearl Harbor. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call. Rick, would you confirm, please? Okay, I guess that's it. We do have a quorum, and next item then will be public comment. We'll allow 2 minutes for public comment today. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak at this time?
I didn't fill out the form.
Identify yourself, please. Go ahead,
Sarah Bachland from St. Croix County. I just wanted to just quickly say that the Board of Supervisors, is ultimately responsible for all the boards and what takes place there. Obviously, you know that. And I just wanted to ask you to take a look at everything with the vaccine and everything that's going on, and is the HHS board being successful in all their efforts? And if they're not, ask them to maybe reevaluate what they're focusing on. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make public comment at this time? One last time, does anybody wish to make public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll continue with the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to bring that forward? Okay, we have a motion, a second. Supervisor Long, can you do a second? Okay, we'll vote. Oh, wait. Second, Bob. Now we'll vote. Carries, thank you.
We got duty for 3 more years.
Okay, the next item then will be presentations and recognitions. Kim, are you going to?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Ellsbury. So we're going to do nope, I'm sorry. I was jumping the wrong one. So the Broadband Study. So John, if you want to introduce Jack, and then we'll get started from there.
Good morning, everybody. Today we've got Design 9's representative Jack Madam here to discuss the findings of the broadband study that was commissioned back, I believe, in March of 2021. And they've submitted a plan. It was uploaded and a link was provided to you to review mid last week. So hopefully you've had some time to skim through that 141 pages of thorough information for St. Croix County's broadband needs. And I'll let Jack take it. He's got a small PowerPoint presentation that he's going to present to you.
Thank you, John. As John said, how's that? Is that better? Go ahead. John said, my name is Jack Madam. I'm senior. Again, as John said, we've been involved in a study here of broadband application for St. Croix County since the spring. I've been out here twice. I was here for 3 days in May, and we had 25 meetings with stakeholders over the course of the 3 days. And we also had 2 public meetings during that time. So I've got a brief presentation here, which is a summary of the study. The study is a couple hundred pages long. And among other things, it includes survey results. And survey results consisted of 25 questions which were asked of every resident in the county as well as businesses. And there was also a narrative portion of the study, which is very interesting to read. So if you have any sleeping problems, this would be a good time to take a look at those studies. It's about over 50 pages, and some of them are very well thought out, others not so much, as you might imagine. If somebody has bad broadband, they're not too happy with their provider. But that is part of the plan, and as I said, it's very interesting, and it's a good guide as to how future broadband might be implemented in St. Croix County. So we did a technical and asset analysis. We tried to determine what existing broadband assets were in the county, because we don't want to duplicate any effort. We don't want to step on anyone's toes, especially the current broadband providers who have facilities in the county and may be contemplating additional ones for the future. So we analyzed what was available, where there were gaps. We did the surveys, as I mentioned. That was an ongoing process of about 2 months. We analyzed connectivity solutions, what ways were most effective to improve the broadband. There's wireless, there's wireline, there's satellite. We did preliminary design and cost estimates. So we analyzed the existing towers, fixed wireless towers in the county, determined who owned them, where they were located, what sort of condition they were in. We did wireless propagation study to determine where additional towers could be placed for maximum coverage, and those are all in the study. They're mapped, and there's also costing information for what it would cost to construct new towers. We also investigated infrastructure funding and grant opportunities, and as you probably know, there's a tsunami of funding that's currently in progress and will soon be, based both on CARES, ARPA, and also the new infrastructure plan, which is going to be available sometime in the later part of 2022, which has just recently passed last November. So we've analyzed all of those. We've made recommendations as to how to proceed to secure funding, and in general, how to handle the overall financial viability for a broadband network. The broadband study, these are just a few of the major points. 88% of respondents were interested in having access to gigabit fiber internet. So that's fiber internet typically that has 1,000 megabits going both download and upload. 94% believe the government should help in some way to facilitate the improvement in broadband. 40% of the residents report that the quality of their internet service determines where they live. We have seen this increasing considerably over the past couple of years, as you might imagine, especially with COVID and people having to work from home, do schooling from home, possibly telemedicine, et cetera. This is a very important consideration, and it's been increasing over the past couple of years. It's no surprise that 80% of businesses think that internet's important, and 73% of the businesses reported that they need their employees to be able to work from home, either part or full-time. So based on those results, we're recommending that the county develop, that there be a county-wide broadband strategy, that the county government should not be an internet service provider. We've had some discussion with a number of county personnel, and it's been made clear to us that the county really has no appetite for expending their funds on improving the broadband infrastructure. So it's also obvious that counties shouldn't be internet service providers. Municipalities and counties generally haven't done a good job at this, but there is some way in which they should be involved, we think, in providing additional broadband services. Obviously, one of the first things that can be done is, if funding is available, to work with providers to determine what plan the provider might have to make maximum use of any funding that might be available, whether it's federal, county, or state. So the county should work directly with the providers at every opportunity. The county perhaps should make investments in certain portions of infrastructure, such as conduit to house fiber. Conduit can be put in the streets. It's simply plastic pipe. You've probably seen it in your homes and plumbing. 2 or 4 inches in diameter, goes under the pavement, somewhere between 2 and 4 feet. And it can be done in conjunction with any road improvement work, whether there's additional sewer work or water work being done. If roads are being resurfaced, then that would be the time to put in conduit. So we think that this process would be a long-term organic process where any improvements to broadband infrastructure are done in conjunction with other projects where feasible. So it'll be saving probably 90 to 95% of construction costs by doing that. The county can then lease out that conduit. The county could decide to put fiber in the conduit, or they could simply allow other providers to do that at a minimal charge to cover any sort of maintenance costs that might be required to maintain the conduit and the fiber if they decided to do that. I've already mentioned about the importance in working with the existing providers, so the county should seek to try to improve any partnerships or establish partnerships they might have with wireless internet service providers or wireline service providers. Improving the affordability of fiber and wireless or broadband in general is very important, and the new funding that has come out of Washington, both ARPA and the new infrastructure plan, includes a considerable amount of money to help with that. So in conjunction with those opportunities, we have included maps which provide overlays of low, middle income distributions throughout the county, overlain with broadband assets that are existing or planned, so that these can be presented to funding agencies so that we know the income levels of certain areas, we know whether the areas are served or unserved by broadband, and we know what existing broadband assets there are in those facilities. And this is pretty obvious, seek grant funding. We've noticed in our company a sea change. We've done over 250 of these studies around the country, mostly in rural areas. And typically it's a task where we are trying to identify existing broadband assets, point out where there are shortcomings, and as far as the funding is concerned, there really wasn't that much available. But we've seen a sea change. In fact, I was really made aware of that right here in this hallway back on May 25th, when we had a meeting scheduled for 8:30 in the morning. I was here at 8:15, as were 3 people who were going to be attending the meeting with me, Two of them were chairman of the local towns. One was a finance manager of a town. And they were standing there like kids who had just gotten their allowance for the month because they were made aware that they were going to be getting some money from the state, and it could be used for water, sewer, or broadband. Well, they didn't do water or sewer, so they needed to do broadband. So we had a good discussion there right in the hallway, because when they realized that they had this money to spend on broadband, they suddenly realized that they really had to figure out what they were going to do with it. So I think that's only going to be accelerated over the next 6 to 12 months as increased funding comes from Washington. The problem is going to be how to spend the money effectively, not how to get the money. So I think you should be made aware of that, because it has been a sea change in broadband planning for this country. And I guess we have COVID to thank for that, but we may as well take whatever benefit we can get from it. Managing expectations is important. As soon as residents find out that the county is thinking about improving broadband, then of course they expect that they're going to be first in line. So again, I think it's important that the residents realize this is a long-term plan, that it's going to take 5 or 10 years to substantially improve the broadband throughout the county. If wireless internet service providers or some entity that was partnered with the county decided to put up towers, we're probably talking a year to put them up. Whereas a year or 2 years ago, it might take 3 weeks to get enough gear in to construct a new fiber network. We're now talking 4 to 6 months. So even if you started planning today because of supply line problems, also because of increased interest in broadband assets, this makes planning even more important. So the expectations among residents and planners have to be managed. And we need to develop a long-term funding strategy that's not dependent on loans from Washington or funds from Washington. In the course of analyzing what broadband assets are available, we did surveys of all of the existing providers, and all of these are laid out in detail in the plan. I just have a couple of slides to summarize those. This is what we estimate to be a typical cost for a broadband package, $156 a month. About $50 of that are fees charged by the cable or broadband company, some of which we know what they're for, others we don't. And this is what we estimate it's going to, what the residents and businesses on St. Croix County are going to be spending over the next 30 years on broadband. It's about $2.5 billion. So we estimated over the 34,000 households and 2,300 businesses, based on the type of broadband they had. It might just be a cell phone, might be DSL or what we call little broadband, could be cable, or households with no internet who are trying to get their internet from a satellite or from some other source. And based on the monthly cost and the annual cost, extrapolating that out, that's $2.5 billion. So there's a lot of money being spent by St. Croix residents on broadband. This is the result of the survey that we did. There are a number of these that are plotted. This one happens to be the satisfaction level on the part of residents. We also did one for businesses as well. We have red, yellow, green. I think we can understand what those mean. The green respondents indicate that they had sufficient broadband. The red were very dissatisfied or dissatisfied with their broadband service. So it's obvious that in the more rural and outlying areas, the red dots predominate. So this is why we think that a mix of broadband assets are important, both wireless to be able to reach the rural areas economically, fiber for the more densely populated areas, but eventually we think that everyone in the country is going to have fiber just like everybody now has electricity. It's just going to take some time, which is why it's so important to manage the expectations on the part of residents. Based on our analysis, we have proposed a middle mile fiber network. Middle mile means that it's a network which doesn't connect individual businesses or homes. It simply is a transport network that allows providers to attach to this network and bring their services to the individual homes. It doesn't do much good to provide fiber to a home or a business if there's no way to get that information off the local network out onto the internet. And this is what the middle mile is used for. There already is a fairly robust middle mile network in Wisconsin called the WIN network, and it certainly would be advisable to determine whether this can be attached to the WIN network. We've already done investigations along those lines. We don't think we're duplicating any of the effort that they've done. They do have one line that we're aware of in St. Croix County, so we could certainly connect to that. And that would provide a more regional connection, not only to St. Croix County, but to other abutting counties and beyond. So the red line pretty much covers those areas that are not covered now, and we've overlain that network with the connectivity characteristics of the residents in the county. So in this case, we're seeing that the blue are the low cluster areas, low speed clustering areas, and the red have the high speed clustering. So similar to the map that I showed you regarding the satisfactory level, this reflects that in the sense that in this case, the red dots are in those built-up, highly populated areas that have decent cable broadband services now, whereas the blue dots are in the more rural areas that don't have very good connectivity. So we've designed this middle mile network to allow providers to connect to it and be able eventually to connect those residences and businesses which don't have very good connectivity now. This is another map overlay showing the sparse and densely locations for high-speed internet and low-speed internet. And the yellow areas are predominantly low-speed currently. So this is another reflection of the information which I just showed you, which again shows the overlay of the middle mile network, which eventually will be able to provide better connectivity to all of those residents and businesses that have low internet connectivity speed now. And again, another overlay showing the location of the middle mile to both existing and proposed wireless towers. The wireless towers are good for getting decent broadband coverage. By decent, we mean at least 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. To those folks who might have poor DSL connectivity, which might have only maybe 1 to 5 megabits on a good day. So any resident who had DSL and can get some decent fixed wireless would be happy, at least for a while. But eventually we think, again, that they're going to want to be connected to fiber. Not only that, but the towers themselves need to be connected to fiber to be able to carry back all that information that they've been gathering from the localities from which they're servicing. We also priced out what these would cost, and this is the pricing for the middle mile network. It's 109 miles, and it shows you all of the equipment that we required to put that together. We think in this case, almost all of the network is underground. Most of it is direct bury. There's boring. There are other types of burying the network. And there's a small portion of it that is aerial because it's going over water. Although in many cases, even water doesn't prevent underground construction. But in this case, we've done the estimate based on aerial going over water. And this is the pricing associated with that gear, broken down by materials, engineering, everything from bookkeeping and administration to engineering and legal costs. And the total for the middle mile network we estimate is about $12 million. Now, this of course does not include any profit or any additional costs that a private company would need in order to construct this network. These are simply raw costs if in fact the county decided to build a network like this, it gives you a good idea of what it would cost or what a public-private partnership would need to contend with if you're trying to determine what a network like that would cost. This is an additional portion, if you recall. The middle mile network has this middle yellow portion, which is used to create redundancy and connect various elements in the middle mile network. And we priced that out separately. And that's 23 miles. And the total cost for that is $2.5 million. So for less than $15 million, St. Croix could have a world-class middle mile network to which the providers could attach their local networks.
Do you object to taking a question from one of the
I
supervisors?
do not.
Supervisor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one quick question. With the estimate of the $11 million that you provided an estimate, I noticed that 65% is related to the cost of the boring. And so I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that we could significantly reduce costs if we were to install conduit at the time that we did transportation projects. So that would if we were to do that as a strategy for the county, that would significantly reduce the $11 million, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Significantly.
Thank you.
And we think that these figures are conservative, but you're right. If you can take measures to reduce the cost by prudent planning, that would certainly reduce the cost of the overall project. We also estimated a local project, and in this case, we chose New Richmond based on suggestions by their utility department. We wouldn't exactly call New Richmond rural. It's an urban area. They actually have quite a few providers, but a number of respondents, and in fact, a number of the stakeholders we talked to, were not happy with the broadband service they were getting in Richmond. So the utility department in Richmond provided us with a neighborhood which we used as what we call a pilot to determine what it would cost to connect a local portion of the neighborhood. So this is the area that we did. The total length is 14,000 feet, and the number of addresses passed is 260. So again, 2.7 miles of fiber and conduit, and the take rate that we estimated on that was 35%. In other words, of the 260 residents that were passed, 35% chose to take the service. That's a very conservative estimate. Typically, most companies won't build a network unless they can do about 60%. And to build this network, we estimate is $576,000. So 260 homes locally connected. Eventually, we think they'd be connected to the middle mile, which would be part of that project, which I reviewed just a few minutes ago. And that, again, would provide you with a good indication of what it costs to develop both a middle mile and local connectivity by choosing a neighborhood for a pilot. And finally, we're going to talk just briefly about the funding opportunities because we know that's important. We know that the providers are looking to the county and other government agencies to be able to supplement or underwrite their costs. We know there's a lot of money coming, and as I said earlier in my opening remarks, we think that there's been a tidal shift in the fact that now no longer are we looking for funds, we're more concerned with managing the funds that are available and how we're going to use those funds to develop a long-term network. I think we're very fortunate here in Wisconsin. The government has committed a substantial amount to broadband already. The state of Wisconsin has had a broadband commission for over 5 years, as has Minnesota and a number of other states. And we think that's very important in trying to rationalize the whole broadband equation, and particularly the new funding that's going to be available from the state and the federal government. We know that ARPA funding has been made available for broadband, and that's still working its way through the system. And then we have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was passed last November, which allocates $65 billion to broadband. And let me remind you that back when we had the Great Recession in the end of 2008, part of the recovery for that was to build middle mile networks across the whole country, and we spent $780 million on that. And here we're talking about $65 billion, $42.5 billion of which is directly allocated for new construction. There's also $1 billion separately for middle mile projects, for which we think this would qualify. So we think that St. Croix County and Wisconsin in general should be well positioned to take advantage of these funding opportunities that are coming along. We would recommend that, like Brown County, you might consider setting up a broadband office, a commission, forming broadband committees. All of those things are important. And also, you should probably investigate the opportunity for public-private partnerships with the various private broadband providers in the county and the state. Any other questions?
I had one, it came to my attention from a resident that apparently Pierce Pepin, south of us, is planning to or has already put fiber optics on power poles. Is that an option that they looked at?
That's certainly an option, yes. We would estimate that initially, the initial savings is probably about a third the cost of boring underground. At least I would have said that 5 years ago, and I did. Improvements in boring, and I guess we can thank fracking for that too, have really improved the ability to put fiber underground using horizontal boring. But you're right, that initially using poles, if you have access to the poles, depending upon who owns them, depending upon what's known as make ready, where you have to rearrange the wires on the pole, if the poles are in bad shape and need to be replaced, all of those things need to be taken into account before you can really determine that it is less expensive to put fiber on poles. But that is a common way of doing it, yes. And in fact, those cities which have done it are what we call electric cities, where they actually have an electric service which is used to putting cables on poles and connections to meters, et cetera.
Thank you. Other questions? Supervisor Burning?
So are we looking at just taking the around 15 million? Is that one of the things we're looking at is just doing the conduit around the county and in that middle mile, allowing access to telecommunications providers to be able to build out their infrastructure from there and use that?
Well, the plan that was in here for the middle mile is actually to build the network. Conduit, the fiber, all the legal expenses that goes with it, engineering costs, et cetera. Does not include things like switches that would be put on the ends of the cables that would generate signals. We would expect that a provider would do that. You may choose simply to put in conduit, depending upon your road improvement schedule, and let the providers put their own fiber in. There are a number of ways in which it can be done. I think a lot of it depends on the money that's available. You might keep in mind also that the new funding that's coming along from Washington really does require significant improvements in the broadband connectivity. Requires at least 100 megabits download, 20 megabits upload. Some of them require 100 by 100, a symmetrical service. This pretty much removes fixed wireless from the equation, if that's the case. Fixed wireless radios have been improving all the time, and we expect that they will in the future. There's also Elon Musk and Starlink and direct connectivity, and I've spoken to Ken and John about that option as well. So we have covered those options too. But the $15 million, the 12 for the ring, and then the interconnection, the $2.5 million for that, the total of about $15 million, is for a complete middle mile system, not including any burden that a private company would have to absorb by putting that in, profit, et cetera.
And then a follow-up on that, you were talking about surveying businesses and the fact that they want their employees to work from home. What discussion or were there any follow-up surveys regarding how much they would be willing to invest in a network like this if they're if they're going to utilize this to save money on leased properties or having properties. Has there been any follow-up on that to see what they're willing to invest into this in order to make that happen for their private business?
Well, we know that some of the local providers have those details pretty well worked out. For instance, Baldwin Telecom, Northwest. They've been providing service for a number of years, so many of them charge connectivity fees depending upon how close the business is to a street, for instance. I happen to know that in Troy, Baldwin has budgeted a considerable amount of money to make connections to residences out there. So those residents apparently are used to paying a connection fee, and I presume the businesses are as well. Most businesses do. That, I think, would be determined by whatever entity is actually going to be doing the construction and or the servicing. You can work a construction fee into an overall annual or longer-term payment. It could be made into a loan. There are a lot of ways in which it could be handled. So in effect, you could say there's no construction fee. You simply need to subscribe. And again, this is similar to what Elon Musk has done. You pay $500 for an antenna and you pay $99 a month. And as long as you think Starlink's going to be around a while, and it sounds like a pretty good deal, especially if you have poor DSL or other type of service. Any other questions?
Supervisor Hanson?
When we're talking about putting in the conduit and other infrastructure, especially the cable, and this ties the next step after Supervisor Burning's question, what do we have any assurances that that infrastructure will be followed through with? How do we get it to the households? Individuals going to have to pay for that connection, or do we have any assurance from the providers that they will follow through and take it the next step? Or are we just hoping?
I think you put your finger on one of the continuing problems with broadband in America. And that is, if all this funding is available, are we simply going to hand it to the providers and trust that they're going to do what's in the best interest of Croix residents and businesses? This is one of the reasons why we recommend that counties and government entities have some skin in the game. Either they own the conduit and the fiber that goes through it and lease it out to the providers to offer their services, or come up with some other sort of arrangement where they have some control. If there's a grant that comes along and the county decides that they're going to give a developer $12 million to develop a middle mile network, what sort of conditions is the county going to put on that investment? The provider, of course, would like no strings. They'll simply say, we're going to provide the best service available. But what happens even if they do that, if that provider gets sold? What recourse does the county have to be able to recoup or take advantage of that investment that's been made? Not much, unless you have some skin in the game. If you own the conduit that the fiber goes through, if you own the fiber that then gets leased out to the providers, you have more leverage. That, of course, opens up another can of worms, which is, how is the county then going to establish an entity to be able to own and manage those facilities? It's been done across the country. Dakota County in Minnesota is a good example of that. They have $5 million every year they have in their TIP program, the Transportation Improvement Program. And this is for fiber. They have a lot of fiber. In fact, we've been working there for about 4 years because they now have so much they're trying to distribute it to the municipalities, and they're also trying to commercialize it. So that's one end of the spectrum where they have maintained complete control over that, and now they are distributing it. The other end of the spectrum is to have the provider solely manage, construct, manage, and own that facility, in which case the county is, as you suggest, simply relying on the good word of the provider. So we have outlined a number of different organizations in the plan as to how this can be handled. Some cities and counties set up nonprofits, some set up public-private partnerships, some have a utility division within their organization that manages these facilities. There's a whole host of ways in which it can be done. But we think it is important that the county maintain some sort of supervision, ownership of these assets.
Further questions? Supervisor Toljan?
I notice we have no understanding of where there is already high-speed internet available or where the fiber cables are laying right now.
Well, we do have a chart in the map that does show existing fiber, but it's publicly sourced information. In fact, John Allegro emailed me about 10 minutes after he got the plan saying, I'm not seeing any local fiber here. We have a rough idea where there is some fiber, for instance in Troy, which I mentioned. But as you can imagine, a provider is not going to be particularly forthcoming with the specifics about where exactly their network is. So in the plan I outlined for New Richmond, we said that it was a 35% take rate. Let's say it was a 50% rate. That means that half of the homes are not connected to the provider's network, and that provider would be telling us, virtually telling the world, who those are, and they don't want to do that. So they have been very vague. We've spoken with Baldwin Telephone, we've spoken with other providers, and they have given us some vague maps about where their services are, but nothing specific. We know, for instance, that Troy is almost completely covered with fiber.
Well, if they want to play along, shouldn't they work with us on that?
Well, that's why we went with the Middle Mile Project, because we think that all the providers can take advantage of the Middle Mile Project. If we're talking about something like Troy, for instance, or New Richmond, then in some sense it's proprietary to them as to who they're connected to and to the extent of their network. But if they can take advantage of the middle mile, then that's what we would call an open access network. At least that portion of the network is open. So if we could get the middle mile done, that would be a great step.
We're not stepping on fiber that's already there by putting that middle mile
No,
in?
the fiber that's there that we know of, the so-called middle mile, is already spoken for. For instance, it's the highway department. It's a company called Zayo, which is running fiber from Chicago to Minneapolis. It's running through St. Croix, but St. Croix doesn't have any access to it. I can't tell you how many times I've gone someplace and a business owner has said, I know there's fiber right outside here, but I don't have any access to it.
Yeah. I just don't understand why we don't know where the fiber is.
Jim Ellsdorf tried to sell me a hill we could put a tower on here.
All right.
Supervisor Tino?
Thank you. I guess I have a problem with, we're approximately $15 million to get the middle mile and the towers, is that correct?
No, just the middle mile.
Just the middle
The
mile?
towers are priced out individually in there as
And
well.
so what kind of dollars are we looking at there? Because they're going to be required to make the middle mile work.
No, they aren't.
They aren't?
No.
Okay.
The-
Then,
The middle mile would support the towers if the towers were built.
and who's going to pay for them?
That's, it's been made very clear to me, it's not going to be the county.
Okay, thank you very much on that one. Now, on top of the 15 million with the middle mile, you showed that there was a cost of about $500,000 for a small subdivision. Am I correct in New Richmond, your example?
Yep.
That goes where?
That was in a neighborhood in New Richmond.
And who paid for it?
That depends. That was there simply to show you what it costs to provide a fiber network in a neighborhood.
Okay,
So-
so we're only just getting this,
We're not making any sort of financial commitment.
Okay.
Nothing has been decided about where the money would come from, who would own it, who would pay for it.
and we go back to your chart, your circle there, that it said it was about $150 to $160 a month for the homeowner. I know I'm at least paying that. I call it an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
How do we know that once we do all this and spend all this money, that the people are going to be willing out in Glenwood, and, you know, they're not close to the cities where they're maybe working at 3M. How do we know that they're going to actually pay to utilize this service? You know, everybody can say, I want it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to pay for it.
You're asking for a commitment?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think that's a very important point as well. And this is one reason why we're depending on providers to actually make the connections to individual residents and businesses, because they're taking the risk. So if the money is coming from Washington or the state, and if a provider has a good plan for making the connections locally, then this is what, in my understanding, what happened in Troy, is that Baldwin, together with the town, there was a 50% public funding and 50% company funding to build that network in Troy. So Troy was taking a risk, but it was underwritten 50% by the town. Baldwin has told us that they would like to see more of a 60 to 70% contribution by the town or some other government agency in order to do this, because they would like to reduce their risk. But this speaks to the point that you were just mentioning. How do you know who's going to take it? Well, we know that there's $2.5 billion that's going to be spent over the next 30 years just based on the current expenses. So we know there's money there. We know that people are used to paying for their broadband. So many of the services that we would promote, streaming, et cetera, are much less expensive than what typically you would pay now. But you're right, this $155 or $188 really is the minimum. Anyone who has decent broadband and a TV service is paying at least that. And if you look at the survey, quite a few people are paying over $250 per month for their broadband services.
Supervisor Cook?
I have one comment on what Jack's comment there. I would say that that's what they're paying now, but with an open access network, we have potential to create competition to lower those costs. So that's just something to put out there. But I think my question for the chair is, this is on the agenda as a presentation, right? We're not actually taking any action on this.
Correct.
Because we all represent districts that have people with very different opinions, but I think what I see, one of the values of this study is that we have a survey where the vast, vast majority of our citizens want us to do something. They feel the county has a role. It was in the 90-some%. Even for the businesses, it was in the 80-some%. We need to do something. There's very few times that we get that much agreement from our community. So I would hate to see the study, you know, we have the presentation, then it sits on the shelf. I would like to see us move forward with their first recommendation, which is to develop a broadband strategy. We don't know exactly what the strategy is going to look like. These are options that have been presented to us, suggestions about partnerships. We have probably a once in a lifetime opportunity with all this federal funding being thrown at broadband. We don't have a very long time to do planning. It takes a long time to plan a broadband project, and I would assume, my preference would be to take advantage of some of that federal funds from the infrastructure bill, from the existing ARPA funds that are out there. So I don't think we can make any motions right now, but when we get to the items for future agendas, I will be asking for a broadband strategy to be on the next agenda.
Thank you. Administrator Witt.
Yeah, to Supervisor Cook's point, so I've had the report for a while, the first draft and now the final draft. So I've been working on it. At the next admin meeting, we will have a recommendation of actions. So hopefully at the January County Board, you can actually vote on something that would authorize the spending of money to start taking steps towards implementing broadband for the county. So we're going to move fast on it.
Supervisor Leaf.
Oh, actually, a couple quick questions. So this just talks about households. I just think of this opportunity for businesses to come and grow in St. Croix County if we have the infrastructure for them to do business. I mean, it's a huge opportunity for us to take advantage of. But my question with the money is it similar to other grants where we put the money out as a county and then we're reimbursed once they determine that the project met the qualifications? Because I know that's similar to what the CARES, other ARPA funds and stuff other grants are like, so we have to put the money out there. I'm assuming they just don't send us on our good faith that they're going to give us $15 million.
Well, with the ARPA dollars, it's sitting in the bank right now. So we have the dollars, we have things that we can spend it on. The county board has allocated and segmented off different monies. So we have several million that we did segment off for broadband that's sitting there waiting. We really just need that action plan and the final authorization then from the county board of how it's going to be spent. And those are the details that I'm working on, and I'll present at the admin meeting in a couple weeks.
Then we can go after more money.
Correct, yeah. So one of the big deadlines, and the reason I want to move so fast, is March 17th of 2022 is the next PSC Grant Deadline. So I want to make sure we get something authorized in January so that we could take advantage of that grant application deadline with the state.
Based on my interviews with the local providers, they're more than interested in working with the county if the county has some funding they can share with them. So I don't think you'll find any shortage of plans on the part of the providers.
Supervisor Long?
Yeah, real quick clarification on something that Supervisor Cook touched on. If we actually built this middle mile network and all the local providers had access to it, then in theory, we are creating more competition among the providers, and that also in theory would help to hold some of our individual household costs down.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. There are some communities that have open access networks directly to the business. We built a network in Bozeman, Montana, which has 6 internet service providers on the network offering services directly to businesses.
Supervisor Ackerhoff?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand, when we build this middle mile, is that just the county, or do we want providers helping us do that, or do we just want them off of the middle mile?
We think the providers are going to help with that. Obviously, it's a construction project, so you're going to have construction companies just like you would if you were building roads or any other sort of infrastructure entity. But we think that the providers are certainly going to have a say on the direction. We have a map here, as I showed you. There may be modifications either that the county would make or the providers would make to try to improve the worth of the network because it could be closer to certain areas. So all of those should be taken into account.
Thanks.
Supervisor Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a general question on the implementation, and probably maybe it's down the road, but are there things that we as a county or other counties have done to streamline permitting and coordinate across utilities that would make this more attractive for partners in the private sector?
That's one of the recommendations that we make. For instance, we're doing a study in Wright County, Minnesota, and Dig Once is a big consideration there, so they're streamlining their rules on that to make it clearer. They're also streamlining rules on franchises for municipalities. That's been a big hurdle on the part of providers. It's been used by incumbents to try to keep out competition. And certainly zoning, trying to have a one-stop zoning shop is, in any county that's trying to make improvement in their broadband or bring in more providers is certainly doing that. That's very important. In fact, that's one of the most important things the county could do is to streamline those processes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item of business then will be the presentation of the Government Center expansion project. I believe Mr. Ellsbury is going to come.
It's going to HDMI it here. Yep. HDMI, gotta do the right thing. Gotta be smarter than the cord. There we go.
Ta-da.
Did it. And now,
And I'm just going to introduce the
sheriffs, and then they're gonna roll it out to
Right.
you. So, yeah, then you're
I'm
on
just
prep.
gonna have the drawings prepped. They'll speak.
You gotta queue it up while they're speaking.
I don't know if they have any specific items. So, start with, like, this drawing, or I could start with the lower level.
Yeah, I think if we drop, well, let's start with this.
Okay. You want me to stay here and drive some of the drawings while you're
Oh,
here?
you wanna stay and
otherwise-
drive? That's perfect.
I don't have to.
I'm going to let these two talk, and then I'm going to just sit down. You can do this.
Yeah, I'll let
'Cause then you
speak,
can explain
it'll
along
be
with-
weird this side by side.
Break time. Break. Not break.
I've had no requests, so go ahead, we'll start with the presentation at this time.
Good morning. I'm here to talk about the addition on the south side of this building, and then also a little addition on the north side of the building. The addition on the north side will incorporate a freight elevator, some miscellaneous equipment down there, things you find on a loading dock, including a loading dock, which this building does not have. The need for this is we've kind of put as much people, as much furniture in departments that we can. We've kind of filled it to the rim. For those of you who have taken the tour and gone firsthand and looked, you can see that we're not just telling you it's full, it really is. For those that haven't gone on the tour yet, I understand there's one after this, and the doors for the departments are decorated because it's almost Christmas, so you'd get a 2-for-1. Christmas doors and a tour of the building at no extra cost. So what we had was we had the sat with the department heads back in it was in 2019, and looked at what they had asked for before, and then we also looked to see what we'd be looking at as far as employees, where they saw their growth, and so we could supply what they needed out further. They came to several meetings and determined how many square feet they needed, and it was based on amount of people working. COVID did change some things, but we also have, we are bringing in social services will be using this building more than they have before. So if it's, if there's a problem, they can take care of some of it here instead of having to send the person to New Richmond or somewhere else. We'll be able to help them here. We also reached out to the DOC and Department of Corrections. They were here at our last open house. We had 2 persons show up, and they really liked the idea of partnering. There's a lot of things that they do together with the sheriff and Hudson PD and so on and so forth to do what they do. Justice Services, that's another one who also kind of weaves into this story. They share the same kind of things that the sheriff does and so on and so forth. So it made sense to incorporate them into the plan. And then because I got a boss that's really smart, he's like, well, let's charge them rent. We'll sign a 20-year lease. And for the next 20 years, they'll be paying that portion of the building. And this is happening in a lot of counties in the area. By allowing somebody to use a space for 20 years, they have a building, they have a place. If we grow exponentially, we are allowed to take that back. This happens in real estate quite a bit. We sat down with the sheriff. We took a ride out to Red Wing, because Red Wing is also a sheriff and local police combined station. And then we spent some time in Eau Claire. Sheriff from Eau Claire is here today to talk to you a little bit about what all came through the meetings that we had. But it was amazing to see when we toured Eau Claire how well the police department and the sheriff department, how well they get together and how much synergy there is between the two. It's an amazing thing. So it's been really nice for me to go through and take these tours. So as we go from this part, from the sheriff, and then they're going to come up and talk about that and answer any questions you have. We're going to go with the architects who come up and kind of work through this as well, any questions. And then I'd really like you to take a tour. And as we get you around and you see how crammed we are for space or how inefficient some of the usage of the space is, and it's not the fault of anything else, this is why we're building the building. So, if I could, Sheriff Knutson? Sheriff Knutson? Okay. There we go, not bad. Not bad, remember.
Good morning. I know it's not a great topic to start off the morning with money, but part of our, as we got into some of these discussions, and I remember back in 2010, even with Sheriff Hillstead discussing what the future needs of law enforcement, sheriff's office were going to be, and how we were going to grow and how we were going to handle the calls for service and handle combined resources with other municipalities to deliver the best service we could to the community. And then recently, it was brought up again of possibly an expansion of the building. So one of the questions that actually Administrator Witt had brought up right away was how would it work with Hudson PD combining in this building? And aside from the money, which is obviously number one, but number two, it's a willingness and a cooperative motion to get this going. And I was all on board. I think this makes complete sense that as we look to expand, that we do it with other partners. I know Chief Jeff Wellams and I get along very well. We've known each other for a number of years. There are agencies that we know of in other areas that built a combined sheriff police department that they didn't combine any services. They built it under one roof, but they were two different. We kind of want to build that together. And some of the areas that we would combine our resources on are areas that currently Hudson PD has and we have two different areas. Training rooms are really critical for keeping our trainings in-house. Right now, back in 1993 when this opened up, patrol had about 20 patrol deputies, about 6 investigators. And since then it's obviously grown. And what was in here for the training room is, I think you'd be surprised at what the training room we have now is. It's really small, and we couldn't fit our patrol staff in a meeting, let alone our agency staff. Agency staff, that would be a very large area, but even one division cannot fit in our training room right now. So training rooms is kind of important for us to also train with other municipalities and other cities to get some of the best services and to all be on the same page to serve the citizens. The other area we would really like to combine in this build out is the evidence area. Not only the storage of, but the processing. There's different areas as well. When it comes to the processing, it's the physical from a burglary, but now so important is our forensic lab. And a combined forensic lab is, I think, critical to so much is tied to phones and computers, technology. And a couple years ago, we added and built in an area that used to be office space. Jim had come down and put up some walls for us to build a forensic lab. And it's really in the middle and part of technology and computers. It's air movement and temperature, and we're kind of putting things in that were never really planned for many years ago. So I think there's some great possibilities, and I look forward to combining resources with Hudson PD and hoping that our trainings and our resources can really come together. Ron Kramer, who's been in law enforcement for 45 years. I didn't want to shortchange him, but I knew it was about my age. So
Come on over and I'll burp you.
So I'm going to call Ron up. Eau Claire County and Eau Claire PD combined several years ago, and his office was one of the places we went down to tour, and Ron was very gracious in showing us the goods and kind of the wish we would have done different. So Ron, I'm going to turn over to you to discuss some of those.
Thanks, Sheriff. I traveled only 71 miles this morning, so it's not an expert. Anything over 100 miles is the expert. 20 years ago, we sat down and with the city and county, the county board and the city council, and they wanted to come up with the county policing idea, that we'd have one department together. The statutory rules didn't provide it, that the chief could be the head of the county. They have a jurisdictional responsibility for the city of Eau Claire. That fell apart. We did the big study, fell apart, never went anywhere. Jerry Staniszewski, who was the chief, worked with me in the drug task force and became chief, and we sat down and talked about combining services because we were starting to see a need in our, as Sheriff Knudsen mentioned, our computer forensic area for cell phones, computers has grown immensely. And the district attorney liked what they were seeing coming out of the computer forensic. It was making our cases more prosecutable. The evidence was there on these cell phones. The other area that we had trouble with was they had an evidence room and we had an evidence room, and I was working the drug task force. You had to decide whose evidence room it was going to go into. So Chief Staniszewski and I talked about, why don't we make one evidence room, and they had 2 civilian employees that were in control of the evidence room, and it gets audited every year by the police department. The police department also, they run the comm center, the communications center, and we said, well, we'll do the fingerprinting. If you're going to do evidence, we'll do the fingerprinting and so forth. One of the things that we found as we moved together, I worked in the drug task force in Dunn County, and I'd have to go across the hallway from Dunn County over to the Menominee Police Department to talk to their 2 drug investigators, and wondered, why aren't you guys together? We have mutual people that we're working on, and for deconfliction purposes, if we can sit down and talk about John Smith is dealing methamphetamine, and we're both working on it, and we both have intel. Sheriff Knudsen mentioned about the training rooms, and the training rooms really, we've been able to bring FBI, other entities in to train both the city and county at the same time and bring higher level of training for our officers. One of the things that we're looking at right now, the Eau Claire Police Department, and I heard mention Human Services coming in, mental health, assigning a mental health specialist to come on some of these cases that we're dealing with that are critical incidents and people are in crisis. So it's good to have that social worker connection with us immediately. Sexual assaults of minors, to have the Human Services directly connected with us. And I mentioned, or heard mentioned, probation parole. We used to have a probation agent embedded in our jail. They moved, and they're up in Chippewa. It was a bad thing, because most of our population that is being housed in jail are on probation holds, and we're trying to, like a hotel, move the bed space real quickly. We're kind of like a bed and breakfast on steroids. One of the things that you're going to see putting the Detective Bureau together, and I'm very proud of the fact that I come in the morning with a cup of coffee and I see city and county detectives talking to one another. It's not about the Green Bay Packers or Minnesota Vikings. It's about cases. I see a city detective talking to one of our county detectives going out the door to do the interview. We do briefings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we have to have a bigger space. We have a conference room outside the jail that FBI and our local partners, university, state patrol, come in and listen to what's going on. It makes a better collaboration for law enforcement, for the local agencies. Our smaller departments come in and share some of the things that are going on. Fall Creek's 9 miles from us, Augusta's 20-some miles. They come up and they get to hear what's going on in the city of Eau Claire, and it's a better concept than ever before. Very proud of the organization. Both the city fathers and the county board were able to get together. The city's renting from us, and the building's being paid for through rent and so forth. But again, one of the areas that we asked both the city to do and us, take a 15-year look out and see what your population's going to be, how many officers, the need for increasing areas. But our detectives are in cubicles. The supervisory people are in offices. We have areas for the detectives to go meet in a private area or dictate a report in a private room. We collaborated and did all of our interview rooms together, including the jail. We're on one system for interviews. It's really worked out, and I appreciate the fact that St. Croix and Hudson came over, took the tour to see what we got. We're very proud of what we have. We did this in connection with our jail facility, and we restacked. Our management people are on the second floor, along with our detectives, administrative staff. We have one front window for people to come in and get reports. And believe it or not, it'll say City of Eau Claire and Eau Claire County, and people stand there. I don't know what window to go to. Well, where did it happen? We have to find out. It was in the City of Eau Claire to get the report. But we have a shared records department also, and so the city will issue their reports out, and we'll issue ours out. So it works really well. And our records people were on the same software, Spillman, and they work together. So again, it's a very good collaboration, but you have to have a sheriff and a chief that set the tone that we are going to work together and make sure that it's a long history. And you'll see the collaboration really meld together in the first couple of months. It was amazing to Chief Staniszewski and myself, and very proud that the city and county fathers could get together and get this project done for us. But again, you're welcome. I'll take time if you want to come over and see our facility and ask questions, or if there's a follow-up, get a hold of Sheriff Knudsen. Thank you.
Oh, you're good then.
So Jeff, as part of the Hudson Police Department, how did this fit into what your plans were?
Yeah, well, I've kind of trying to been put a bug in Scott's ear for the last 4 years about this kind of an idea, because at the City of Hudson level, we've been doing space analysis, needs studies, and everything like that since about 2005, knowing that we were desperately running out of space and trying to figure out what we were going to do about it. This really makes sense from our perspective, because we spend a lot of time in collaboration with the Sheriff's Department, working with the DOC, working with Human Services, And we have to go to all these other locations to do that, which takes time, which takes resources. All being in the same building, I walk upstairs or walk across the hallway and be able to get done what you need to get done is more efficient, just from a time perspective. The training rooms that he talked about, very important for us, yes, interagency-wise, to be able to do training together, but it also would allow us the opportunity to contract with state training providers to host trainings in this area. I'm sure the sheriff can speak to it. When we send officers to training, the majority of our training budget's taken up in hotel fees and lunch vouchers, right? Because we have to send people to Green Bay, Appleton, Milwaukee for training. If we had the facilities here where we could host training sessions, right, that saves the county, the city, all kinds of money by being able to host these training systems here. And then allows us even better collaboration with regional law enforcement partners because they're sending their people here to be trained, right? It's all about relationships. Everything we do in life is about relationships, and this would just increase our ability to have positive flowing relationships with our partners to better serve our communities, right? So it makes sense for well, basically everything that has been brought up. It makes complete sense to do something like that. Thank you.
So it's almost time for the architect to come on board here, but I just wanted to share with you. So we took the amount of land needed, space needed for the merging of the sheriff's department, for the Hudson PD, for the sheriff, and then we also took into account DOC, and we've got the rooms, we've got the space. And this building is a concept. So what you see does not necessarily mean this is what it's going to 100% look like. This isn't what it's going to end up as. We just had to make sure we had room at the inn for everybody who had reservations. So we were able to do that. And Tim, you can come on up. We get Dan.
I think both of us.
Dan and Tim will be up.
I'm Dan Lawrence with HCM Architects, Tim McElwain with HCM Architects. Tim, did you want to give a brief intro?
Thank you for your time. A brief introduction. The two sheriffs did a fantastic job, and the chief as well. They were key people involved very early on. Our firm was brought on about 4 months ago, so it wasn't a matter of years. But we took the master plan that was finalized in 2020, and with all the new participants that were mentioned previously, we took a fresh look at what this project could be. And frankly, it added a bunch of square footage because we're bringing more people onto this campus, not only taking care of the needs that were identified in 2018 to 20, but for these new groups to come on. And we really focused on the public safety aspect initially because that was the biggest new member to join. And that's really where we worked, and Ron was really gracious on that tour, and we saw a lot of good things. That really brought about some of the plans you'll see here. The other thing we did is we literally carried through some of the ideas that were brought about in the master plan. That was a lot of hard work went into that, and it was accepted as a conceptual plan. So what you'll see in the judicial areas really remained as is. And I always tell people the story that if we're in a 100-mile foot race, we're really at mile 5 right now. Very early on, and we've focused a lot on how do we fit this onto this site? How do we want to improve the site for not only 20 years, but 30 years and beyond? And so the strategy of the infrastructure, of the ring road, the utilities, a lot of those things are starting to happen now as part of the phase 1 project. but as well the strategy that we can have tenants that can help fund a project and be good co-residents of a facility. But in 20 or 30 years, when additional space is needed, it's there as the county continues to grow. So that's where we're at today, and some of you have seen some of this work. Dan is going to take you through a quick overview from the site plan to the overall plans, but as Jim mentioned, these are conceptual. These are, we call block plans. What we're concerned about is the block the right size? Is it generally where it should be in the building? And if it is, that's a success at this point. So we know that there's going to be lots of twisting, tweaking, and we've had really good input up to this point, but it's going to continue on and improve the building as people really get involved department by department. So.
Thanks, Tim. Great setup. As a brief overview for everyone, some of you, like Tim mentioned, may have seen the drawings. But as we go through this, just to help you understand, we've got colored legends to the right side with further more detailed notes about square footage. I won't be going into great detail on those, as I'm trying to be as brief of a high-level description as possible. But really focusing on the relationships that were brought up, the synergies that were brought up earlier, and how this site and this new addition can bring separate facilities into one location that not only assists all those staff groups, but assists your community in just being one centralized service location. The reason we start with this site plan is just to give you an overview of your existing building and where the proposed addition is, but mostly it's to highlight one of the key features of this site plan and addition is creating a new access drive at an existing curb cut on Vine Street. This allows for 2 access points, one on Carmichael and one on Vine, for public safety. So that will assist with just response times, but also just security for the site as well. As we move into the floor plans, once again, the legends on the right, square footages on the right as well, but I'm going to zoom in to the more detailed plans with the colorful blocks. What you will see is this dashed red line that cuts through the drawing, then goes up and over. That's the line of your existing building footprint today. So anything below or to the side of that is considered part of this addition. Also, to help illustrate and describe this drawing, the spaces in yellow are those that are considered shared spaces, items that were identified earlier, and we'll hit some of the highlights of that and those relationships here coming up in just a moment. And then the ground level plan shows blue. That's the Hudson PD as part of their tenant space. Now, what's interesting to note when we look at this plan and the HPD as a tenant, their overall current need is 20,000 square feet. As you'll see, this blue portion, which is the office area, represents 10,000 square feet. The remainder of that, which is 10,000 square feet, those functions are actually part of this yellow shared space. When we think about sustainability, there's all sorts of great things that we'll be including as part of this building, but one of them is just being responsible with the building footprint. And finding means to share spaces like this is a great way to achieve that goal. So the new expansion here has a new entry plaza and potential for a law enforcement memorial adjacent to the jail entry. And then the new entry piece here is a shared public lobby, and HPD and the sheriff will have a counter that is secure at this public lobby. What's also great is that the views for these counters are perpendicular to the traffic coming in, which just is great visibility and better security for the staff inside the building. The pink locations are representative of vertical circulation, stairs, and elevators that connect up through the 3 levels. And so as we start to look at that relationship, we've also got a big block of space here that is accessed from the extension of the drive here. This is a shared secure parking area that will be used by both sheriff and HPD, and it's also potential for secure judge parking or other elements related to the courts. We do have the shared interview space right off of that shared parking, secure parking area where intake of potential persons of interest can occur. Let's see, some of the other shared spaces that were brought up were evidence and training. And so as you can see, we've got in the central portion of the building a lot of ability to have briefing rooms, training rooms that are also located adjacent to the secure parking area for ease of circulation from that training or briefing room to the squad vehicles and the patrols for the day. This evidence storage is key. It was a great example down at Eau Claire County, and they've got storage racks, secure storage. This is a place for passing of the evidence that comes in from the secure parking area. And then a key piece is this shared secure airlocked evidence return area adjacent to the front lobby desk. So evidence can be returned safely and securely to members of the public at this location. So just key relationships being shared by both groups as we move further into the plan. Once again, this is an existing lower level now that we're inside the existing building. That would all be renovated, but you'd have the sufficient locker room sizes, as we noted, the training, but then a run of shared spaces such as equipment, technical equipment storage, the evidence labs that were mentioned, fitness workout, physical training spaces. So it not only serves, like we said, the HPD tenant, but as we move up to the next floor on the plan, the color in brown is representative of St. Croix County Sheriff. And so they're directly above the HPD. As Tim noted, this is a conceptual plan. There may be a greater level of synergy between the two floors, a greater mix of the two teams. That will be determined as we move forward. This is just identifying the correct location in the building and the correct size. But as you can see, we have that those vertical circulation elements between the two floors for ease of access up and down between the two groups and to those interview rooms as well. We have another shared space, digital forensics, which was brought up by the sheriff. And so, much better training spaces as well. Overall, much improved, greater amount of square footage. And as was noted, as a tenant, and as future, my apologies, as we move into the future, the space below on ground level could be taken over by sheriff. And then these elements in orange, as Tim noted, are representative of your previous master plan related to the courts and all those groups. We have not changed the programming elements. We've just refined and shifted a few things about based on those initial master plans. But all the same space programming elements are part of this plan. We have off of first floor in the main parking lot that new entry plaza, and then it is a new 2-story volume for your civic entry and public lobby into the building with secure access points throughout the area so that we can control, obviously, how deep into the building the public can get to make sure that we have a safe building for all the staff teams. One interesting thing to note, though, is that we are proposing, based on feedback we received throughout this process, a connection corridor to circulation that leads down to the sheriff and HPD public lobby, so that as members of the public come into this lobby, find out that they actually need to go speak with the sheriff or HPD, they can go, instead of having to drive around to the other side, they can simply walk through the plan and then use this vertical circulation area to access that point. And then up on the first, or excuse me, this is first on the second level, as was noted, there are certain groups like the Department of Corrections that can be additional tenants to the building. That at some point, such as, we even note these shell spaces, the building is setting itself up for long-term future build-out. We don't want to build a facility that once you move in, you're already out of space. That would be an unwise use of your monies. So, we're building in some shell space, tenant space, so that there is ability for future growth in the facility. So we focused a lot on that that south addition. As Jim noted, there is a north addition as well, which has that loading dock and a freight elevator. That's a key piece to actually just the construction schedule and phasing of how this will work, because first and second levels will be a huge renovation, significant renovation of these floor plans, as you'll see today on your tours. And so then being able to use the new addition with that freight elevator, be able to shift people around to manage the construction process is certainly a key component of the schedule and construction plan. So at a high level, that's just a review of the 3 floor plans. Are there any questions for the team, or Jim, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the financials and the administrative aspects of combining the departments. I think it's a great idea. It's going to be hugely beneficial in terms of efficiency and working together between the departments. But I represent the county in my district, not the city. So my question is, for my taxpayers, what's the impact on my county tax bill for doing this? Is the city going to end up paying the full burden of the infrastructure cost for adding this space, or is it prorated?
Yeah, I think the details need to be worked out yet with the city, but what we've talked about is a capital upfront contribution from them. So we've estimated their space roughly at $10 million right now. So they would provide that upfront capital as part of the project, and then they would have an ongoing annual lease payment that would cover their operating costs. So it should be, the ideal scenario is that it's net neutral for our taxpayers, county taxpayers who are still city taxpayers, but the city's paying for their portion and the county's paying for their portion.
Thank you.
Supervisor Acton?
Yeah, I have kind of 3 areas. One is that I agree we need to add on. We need more room. And I apologize if I'm going to offend anybody with some of my comments, but I got to be honest and I have to be blunt. I have 0 confidence that Hudson will follow through with any payments, maybe above the initial one. And my example is the joint library. We had an agreement, and they reneged on it. And if they renege on this, we're not going to kick them out, because then they don't have any place to go. But who's going to be paying for it then? Everybody else in the county, above and beyond Hudson. And I don't know, like I say, I apologize, but that's what I know about Hudson. I don't live in Hudson. I'm way over on the east side, and I just know I can't, that's my honest feelings. And the second area is, if we hadn't had Hudson come in, or if we don't have Hudson come in, why did we build the extra building? Because how much larger is that extra building that we already passed the provision 1 on, or going different? How much bigger or smaller is that than the blue space that the Hudson Police Department supposedly, possibly may move into? And why did we have to? Wouldn't we have saved some money if we had not done that? And I guess I have to be honest with my third one, is that there was the committee, and the rest of us county board members had 0 knowledge until it pretty much came out to the public, and we've had 0 input until now, and it's been put forth to the public once, and I believe there were some interviews, and it may be in a paper, and there's the next public meeting tomorrow. And it's like the other supervisors' votes don't matter, because we weren't informed about anything or given any chance to convey what I've just conveyed today. And I feel real strongly about the first one. And that's unfortunately because of my experiences. But as a supervisor, I'm here for 8 years. It's been going on that long, and nothing's changed. And I just am not optimistic about Hudson holding up their end. And I agree with all the pluses, but it comes down to the finances. And I don't think that's going to follow through.
Any other questions or comments? Ken, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I mean, we need to talk about the financials too. We just sort of paused here to talk about the building. To address, I guess, Supervisor Achterhoff's 3 points there. One is the agreement with Hudson still has to be written yet, so I would hope that, you know, with our corporation counsel, we will write an agreement that's, you know, enforceable, and I absolutely would kick them out if they didn't make their payments, so.
Yeah, but what if they didn't have a place to go?
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad.
I don't see us doing that. I do not see us doing that.
So, number 2 then was the additional storage building that we're building, which is phase 1. So that was not sized with the city of Hudson in mind. It's cold storage was just shared between the facilities department and the sheriff's department for impounding stuff. So it was not significantly sized differently or with any inclination for the city of Hudson joining us. I don't know if it would need to be bigger or not because of theirs, but our first phase is not with the city of Hudson, because we still don't have a written agreement with the city of Hudson. So this project, while we're incorporating the scope of it to include them, it still comes down to whether they will agree and whether we're going to move forward. So those are the things that have to happen before those details get worked out.
But I mean, we seem to be doing this without thinking it thoroughly through, because would we have had to build this extra building if we had put it where the Hudson Police Department might go, and I mean, and saved the county, what was the first, that was like $1 to $3 million for building the extra storage facility, which we may not have had to do. I don't know. I mean, and I have to go back and say, I've been on tours. Upstairs is unbelievably cramped, and if we get to the point where we do need a 5th judge, there's no ifs, ands, buts. We need a 5th courtroom. But the way it's being done, I just strongly disagree with, and I don't know if I could vote for it the way it is now.
Yeah, and to the third point that you had about the process that we've used, and you mentioned that you've been on the tours, and we've seen these plans over the years. I mean, we've worked on this for many, many years. And timing-wise of this presentation compared to when we've done other things, presentations to the public and information sharing, it's just a matter of that was the plan that we had come up with out of that committee, which was a public and open meeting. All those meetings were on IQM2 and available for the supervisors.
If you have decent broadband service.
Yeah, well, that goes back to our last point, but we're working on that also.
Supervisor Hall?
So just a more general question for the sheriffs as well. So this is keyed around Hudson, but would there be training opportunities and shared space opportunities for other communities that might be able to make use of this space as well?
When you say communities, law enforcement areas? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That is one of the areas that we want to continue to grow, and you know, even as some of our resources are, when I talk about like our SWAT team. Now, when all the additional ancillary with our negotiators and with our other tactical special teams, we're starting to draw in some of the other agencies as it is. So they will absolutely be involved in training with us.
Supervisor Antino, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I fully support the district attorney's office. I fully support the sheriff's office. I think you've heard me say this in the past. My biggest problem with this is it's $87.6 million price tag. Not one person I talked to in the county, whether it's in my district or not, has any idea that we're going to try to commit to spend this kind of money. And I think we can look at, don't get me wrong, this is a beautiful plan. I think we can look at, just like we did, Health and Human Services. I think in our discussion that you said that Administrator Witt, it was about $10 million total when we rebuilt that Health and Human Services in New Richmond. We can find a facility that we could move, maybe our community development, maybe the financials, out of this building, and then remodel this building to accommodate for the sheriff and accommodate for the district attorney and the potential for another judge without spending $87.6 million. We could do it for a lot less. And that's my point. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Cook.
I think the architects for the presentation today, I think it's very interesting. We're not, I wouldn't say we're even to the point where we're talking specifically about money yet. We're still looking at concepts, and I'm glad we're having another open house tomorrow for the public to come and provide some input. Regarding the City of Hudson and St. Croix County potential joint endeavor, I think it's a great opportunity to create efficiencies for both departments, to have those collaborative relationships, and which ultimately will make our community safer. And I have full confidence the City of Hudson would uphold any part of its agreement.
Supervisor Hall.
Just a real specific question, and maybe out of the blue, but visitation spaces for families wanting to come in and meet with incarcerated inmates, are we keeping them at the same levels that we have now? Are we eliminating them, or are we growing them?
This design won't impact that. Much of our visiting right now is through HomeWave, which is through the internet. So we have one area that they can come still at the front door of the jail and visit face-to-face, but rarely do people utilize that anymore. Much of it is through that HomeWave system. So this wouldn't impact that at all.
Okay. Okay, and Administrator Witt is going to discuss financial issues.
Yeah, so the financial implication of this, we saved the best part for last. So Supervisor Attino is right, though, about the large price tag for this project, and that number can be a very scary number. I think you have to put it into perspective, though. A project of $87 million sounds huge. If you look at a project that the Hudson School District did, a number of years ago, about 5 years ago, it was about a $100 million project where they added on to the high school and redid the middle school. My son lived through all of those construction phases. But that was on one school district. So the county represents 13 different school districts. So an $87 million project is spread out amongst a much larger base. So once you've spread that out over a larger base, that rate comes way down. So what that rate equates to is 40 cents. So an $87 million project will increase the county tax rate by 40 cents per $1,000 of equalized value. To look at it in one way is our current rate is $3.11, the budget that you guys just approved last month. Our budget 2 years ago was $3.51. It was 40 cents higher. So we're going back 2 years. So does the tax rate go up? Absolutely. It goes back to where it was 2 years ago. And then, just like we have for the last 9 years, the tax rate will continue to decrease. So we have dropped the tax rate every year for 9 years, and it's because of the phenomenal growth that St. Croix County has, is why we're able to do that. So it'll go up, and then it'll start to come back down. So 40 cents is the impact. So when you look at it in that perspective, it's not as big of an impact as $87 million sounds like. The other thing you have to look at is what we've done with the building that we have that was built in 1993 when our population was just over 50,000 people. The 2020 census put us at 93,000 people. So we've almost doubled in size since this building was built. And our predecessors and gym and facilities have done a phenomenal job of stretching this building that was projected for 20 years out to 28 years now. We've moved a lot of services out of this building. We've moved them to New Richmond. We've been as cost-effective as we can to find other locations to do that. But at some point, this county will have to add on to this building, and Supervisor Achterhoff, agrees with that and mentioned that we will have to add on. And so now is the right time to do it. If you look at interest rates, they are at historically low rates. I would lock in today, if at all possible, and do an interest rate, because they're only going to go up from here, but they are at rock bottom rates that we haven't seen in well over 30 years. So now is the most cost-effective time to do it for our taxpayers. And you could move some facilities to other locations. I think, though, when we've analyzed the operations of the county, we are really recommending that we build the office spaces that we have here at this location, and that we build space for some of the things that we've moved out to New Richmond, flex space for those employees to come back and provide the services in Hudson area. So what we want to do is provide the best service possible to the citizens of St. Croix County by bringing the employees to the location where the services are needed, rather than trying to build a bunch of different locations just as cost effectively as possible, but spreading it out more. So those are some of the reasons, though, why now we think is the time for this project.
Thank you,
Lots of
Administrator Witt.
questions now.
Go ahead, second comment from Supervisor IT.
I just wanted to point out, you said you had 12 different school districts, am I correct? If you're in Hudson or anywhere in the Hudson School District, Hudson Township, we're going to get crushed because they're proposing a $75 to $100 million project on the renovation of the elementary schools. It's going to be a total devastating blow, I think, as far as the taxes are concerned. And it looks like to me as we're going to start taxing people out of their homes. Or at least when your taxes go up, the price of your home goes down, because if somebody comes in and says they only have $2,000 a month to spend, and more of that goes to taxes, the value of that property is going to go down as far as the sale. I just think there's a way we can look at this project and not spend that kind of money. Thank you.
Supervisor Hanson.
All right, so I've mentioned probably more than a year ago that I've been painted into a corner politically because of a campaign promise to not support a large project. And so I've been firmly opposed to this. However, maintaining my opposition, at least for the time being, I want to say that if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. The cost of money hasn't been cheaper in decades, and diluting the project is probably a mistake. So if you're going to vote for it and you're in mind to vote for it, probably don't minimize what's, excuse me, forgive me. Don't cut back on this project. If you're going to do it right, and take into account the cost of money. Those are my points.
Thank you, Supervisor Hanson. Supervisor Thompson.
I would like to know what the expected, how long this expansion would be expected to be adequate. Because if this building was only meant to be for 20 years, in general, we don't build something that we only expect to last a couple of decades. So I'm hoping that if there's this expansion, that would be adequate for some duration.
Yeah, when we planned, we looked at space needs for the different departments. We looked at a 20-year model. So the space was designed for the current departments, their best estimate of what they would need over the next 20 years. We have built in flex space areas. We have built in tenant areas that can be remodeled and reused for other purposes that will extend us past that 20 years. That's part of the reason that we've added some of those features. So 20 years minimum, but I would fully anticipate, just like this building's made at 28 now, that we will be able to extend that past 20.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. We'll move on then. The next item will be a COVID update. I believe that's going to be via Zoom, is it? Thank you for the presentation. Does anybody require maybe just short 5-minute break? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Be back at 25 after, please. I'm going to call us back into session at this time. Administrator Witt is going to set us up for a brief update on COVID from the Health and Human Services. Okay, go ahead, Kelly, if you're ready.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you guys for having us. I looked back on our calendar and we haven't actually given an update in over 6 months. So good news is we're still here. Bad news is so is COVID. So today we want to really just briefly kind of explain to you some of the data that we've seen over the past 7 months, as well as just kind of our recommendations from public health. We have been pretty spotty connection this morning, so if we freeze up, hopefully we don't, I guess. Ellie's gonna talk a little bit about data.
Thanks, Kelly, and thank you all for having me today. As Kelly mentioned, I'm going to briefly discuss kind of where we have been since we, public health last presented regarding COVID and where we are today. What you see in front of you are two maps of Wisconsin. The map on the left is in blue in the majority, and lighter blue and some dark blue, because back in May, we were at what was a high level of case activity. Case activity meaning how many positive cases were coming in. The burden you see there of 432 relates to how many cases per 100,000 people came in 2 weeks. Back in May, we had 432. We were already starting very high. We had influence from the Twin Cities. If we fast forward to today, 7 months later, you can see the map has definitely changed. Now we are at a split in the state of Wisconsin between critically high case activity and very high case activity. And as you can see, the burden or the number of cases that comes in 2 weeks into St. Croix County has gone from 400 to 1,400. We are in a very high, very critically high level of COVID activity within St. Croix County at this time. What that looks like as we compare 2020 to 2021 longitudinally, we see the year of 2020, our first year of COVID, being represented by blue. And on the top of each blue bar is the total number of cases that St. Croix County had in that specific month. We can see from the blue bars that in 2020, November was our worst month. And we can see now that in 2021, we are replicating the same pattern we saw a year ago. So however, due to the Delta variant, we are seeing even more cases and many other factors, not just Delta, but we have now seen more cases in 2021 in August, September, October, and November of this year. So case activity, as we remember last year being very difficult, this year is only proving more so. I'll now pass it on to Kelly to discuss advisory and guidance.
Thanks, Ellie. So we have been updating our advisory, looking at our advisory every 2 months. Our current advisory sunsets, I think yesterday. Today we will issue a new advisory. None of our recommendations are changing drastically at all. There are just some highlights now that come with the new advisory. Advancements related to emergency use authorization in vaccines have become available since we've met. FDA has approved. Pfizer vaccine, not under emergency use authorization. So we still know that the best way to combat COVID-19 is vaccination. So we encourage everyone to get vaccinated. Everyone 18 and older right now is eligible for a vaccine booster. And so we're highly recommending people talk with their providers. And again, talk with your providers, talk to somebody you trust related to vaccines. It is important in slowing this and getting us to an endemic phase of COVID versus a pandemic phase of COVID. So we are eagerly awaiting the day when we do look at COVID like we do some of our other vaccine preventable diseases. So yeah. Do you guys have questions related to, we wanted to keep this very short, but there's a lot of data, LE updates, and it is found on our data dashboard, but I would guess there's likely some questions.
Please keep it brief. We have a lot to cover yet. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Yeah, two quick questions. Do you keep track of the ones that are hospitalized, who has been vaccinated and who has not? I'm not asking for the percentage. I'm asking if you do keep track.
Go.
Unfortunately, at this time, the number of hospitalizations is at 50 individuals. And for me alone, it is impossible to keep up with people admitting and discharging, which happens sometimes for 2 days. Sometimes they're hospitalized for a much longer period, and we can track them. But keeping a current status of vaccination at this time, no. We are able to access a count, which is what we provide on the dashboard.
Okay, and the second question is, do you have any idea, because I know I was at the Baldwin Hospital last week, and they actually had one person that was intubated that should have been in ICU, but theirs was full, and they could find no they called 22 hospitals. And I'm saying that was full for whatever reason. Do you know how many other serious problems, non-COVID related, have occurred because COVID beds were in use? And I know that's a tricky question, but wondering if anybody's keeping track of that data.
Yeah, thanks, Supervisor Osterhoff. I probably pronounced that wrong. That is a good question. That is a very hard data point to keep track of. I will say we continue to talk with hospital CEOs weekly. The hospital CEO of Western Wisconsin Health, along with the Health Partners Hospital CEOs, as well as Alina's CEO, last week were in what I would call very dire straits related to bed capacity. However, tracking other bad things that either don't get addressed because a COVID patient is occupying a bed, that is a data point that I'm not aware anyone is tracking right now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you. We'll proceed on then to the business items and the Administrator's Financial Report.
Thank you, Chairman Peterson. The financial report is in the packet. If you look at our revenues are all doing very well. Sales tax continues to be strong, one of the most variable revenues that we have. If you look at the expenses, departments are doing a great job staying within their budgets. I fully expect all of the departments to fall within the budgeted parameters. So I don't have any financial concerns even this late into the year. Everything's looking good. And I did just want to thank Supervisor Achterhoff. She found a formula error on the reports in community development. It's been there for 3 years and no one's caught it, including myself or our finance director. But she identified it, and sure enough, she was right, and we do have that fixed now.
Okay, other questions on the financial report?
Last thing then is budget books. I've distributed your new budget books that has the final column. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as the last budget books. If you could return one of the 2 copies to me, we will reuse those parts. Always trying to save money where we can.
Okay, think that concludes that then, and we'll move on to the business items now. The first one is a resolution approving a labor agreement between St. Croix County and Local 453. Do I have a motion to bring that forward? Supervisor Long?
I move to approve the resolution.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Cowner. And discussion? Apparently, no questions or discussion. We'll have a vote on it then. You need a second? We'll vote. Carries, thank you. Next item then would be a resolution authorizing St. Croix County to enter in a settlement agreement, McKesson coordination, and it's on the COVID, the settlement on the opioid. I'm sorry, that's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. So do I have a motion to bring that forward? Supervisor Long.
Yes.
Second by Supervisor Cook. And discussion? Supervisor Cowner?
I was just reading over the information on that and seeing what the county portion distribution was going to be. The only confusion I had in it is trying to read, it was a massive report, but trying to read through it. There was some portions in it had to deal with legal and the legal people being able to draw in portions of it. Maybe I misunderstood how that was working. Is the numbers that are posted, is that what our actual is?
Correct. So our actual take, it depends on whether all plaintiffs in the state of Wisconsin sign on. That's to maximize our benefit. If they don't, it's going to be a somewhat reduced amount depending upon who doesn't approve, but we're hopeful that everyone approves the agreement. With regard to the attorney's fees, the county is required to basically set up an escrow account to draw upon for attorney's fees of 25% of our settlement. However, there's a national pot of money that the attorneys will apply for first to be satisfied. If there isn't enough money in that national pot of money for attorneys, they're going to ask that the county reimburse them to make them whole at 25%. So the county's required to set up an escrow agreement, and that'll probably be through our office, so that the attorneys pursuant to the original agreement get paid their attorney's fees.
Supervisor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick question again to Corporate Counsel. That 25% reserve, what is the chances that that would be not fully maxed out, given that, people will bill for the max that they can get to?
Well, from what our attorneys are telling us, they expect to draw some money from the counties and other local units of government, but not all of the 25%. So, it could be 8%, it could be 5%, but it's not expected to be the 25%. It's just a backstop.
Thank you.
Supervisor Hanson.
What's the time frame for that payment? Is there a specific time frame for them to actually finish billing this thing?
So we're expected to start receiving the money sometime, I think, in the middle of next year. But it's going to be over a series of years. For Johnson & Johnson, the money's going to be paid over a period of 9 years, and the distributors are going to be paid over a series of 18 years. There is the possibility of monetizing that, in other words, discounting that, and the county receiving less money up front. And that's built into part of the state legislation, which helped engineer this settlement.
Supervisor Cowner.
that being the case, if it's extended out over a longer period, if the attorneys come in for their whatever percent that they're looking to receive from us, do we finance that up front, or if we're out 10 years waiting for the money, or how is that going to work?
So the national pool, as I understand it, that money is going to be available immediately. So to the extent that the attorneys are not satisfied by that, they would be looking to the county up to 25%. And I can't give you anything more specific than that, but understand that we expect them to be primarily satisfied through the national attorney fund, and then look to us for partial reimbursement.
I'm sorry, just the question on it though is, if we won't receive funds for 9 years, such as a Johnson & Johnson, if the attorneys submit their statements, are we liable for the funds on the spot, or how does that work if those funds are being allocated over a long term?
My understanding is that we're only responsible for whatever funds we have up to 25%. So we're not expected to pay them up front, their entire remaining bill.
No other questions, comments? Okay, I guess we're ready to vote. Carries, thank you. Next item is resolution amending personal policies and procedures handbook. Do I have a motion for that? Supervisor Long?
Move to approve.
Second by Supervisor Cook. Thank you. Discussion? Supervisor Achterhoff?
Yeah, on page 909, under 6.9.4, it says types of performance evaluation. It says updated language referring to annual reviews to periodic reviews. And then if you go over to page 915, which I got to scroll down to get, there's a statement that says the performance shall normally be reviewed at minimum on an annual basis. So they're contradicting each other.
The intent was, currently performance reviews are required to be done annually, and that language was very specific in the handbook. We do think reviews should be done annually, but not just once a year, and maybe not just at one certain time a year. So we wanted to create some flexibility, so if we wanted to change it to quarterly, we'd have that option, but at the minimum, people should be sitting down with their employees and talking about it annually. So that was the intent of the language. Just to indicate, yes, absolutely, minimally one time a year, but we want to be able to have the flexibility to have more or a different kind of process than just once a year. Does that help? Is that still confusing?
Well, it's still a little bit confusing, because one of them talks about taking away annual, and one, it should be one or the other, in my opinion, but I'm not a personnel, but it's a little confusing.
Okay.
Do we, any questions on that? Do we probably don't need a review of it then. Oh, Supervisor Hanson, go ahead.
Outside employment, are we talking about concurrent employment, people doing two jobs at the same time, full-time jobs?
Correct. Or not even full-time, just having other employment besides working at the county.
Not like an after-work part-time job, but a concurrent job that they're doing while they're working?
No, it could be if they're doing it on the weekends and they only work for us during the week, or they're doing it at night. There can sometimes still be a conflict of interest, even if it's not during the same hours of the workday. So it's any other outside employment that could potentially cause a conflict.
Thank you.
No other questions, comments? We're ready to vote. Carries, thank you. Then we'll move on to the annual department reports. First one's child support, annual department report. Lisa?
Good morning. I'm not going to go through my report verbatim, just give you a brief update on some highlights that we have accomplished this year. We exceeded all 4 performance measures for the second year in a row, and this is because of our exceptional staff to reach this during this pandemic. It continues to be a burden and affect individuals who are ordered to pay child support. So we're working and we're committed to assist individuals in establishing reasonable orders, modifying their existing orders, and referring unemployed or struggling individuals to our Crossroads program, which is direct coordinated with our job service or the workforce connections that we have, or workforce resource, I apologize. So we are available to customers to provide that information. We work one-on-one with them. Heather Jensen from our office is very intricate in this part. She works with the workforce resource to get that accomplished. We have successfully scanned all of our paper files into our electronic case filing system. It's called PaperVision. By September 30th of 2025, we will be able to destroy all of our current closed files, and that will be optimal space for the county. There's a couple instrumental piloting things that are going on with the state that we're involved with. The Kids Modernization Program, which is to modernize our current Kids computer system, our program that we use, to make it more modernized and web-based. And another program I think you'd be interested in that I'm involved with is we have a previous program called What's the Rush, where we work with schools and it's being changed to a child program, and that is choosing healthy interactions, lives, and decisions. We are going to work with the Department of Instruction to make that part of the curriculum so that we can assist other county within the state, other county agencies in the state, others in the state, and the Department of Instruction will work on enhancing this program to provide information on emotional, financial, and legal responsibilities of parenting to, I would assume, high school students. Our next fiscal year that we are working on right now, we're going to be focusing on the county strategic plan, and we'll be reviewing our current practices and providing better customer service. Not that we don't provide exceptional customer service, but there's always room for improvements. I did do another kind of statistical study. So we are considered, St. Croix County is a middle sized agency in the state of Wisconsin. There are 72 counties. We are middle-sized agencies are up 25 agencies are considered middle-sized. We are 9th in the caseload size. We are 9th in court order establishment. We are 8th in paternity establishment. We are 2nd in current support collections, and we're 9th in arrears collections. So I thought that would be just a little bit of good statistics for you to take back. Are there any questions?
Supervisor Actoff.
Should be my last question for the day, as far as I know. And I did try and get a hold of you so that you would know the question I was going to ask and maybe have the data, but there's zero, I mean, and I understand why it's hard to get a hold of people that work in your area, but it's also frustrating when a supervisor wants to. But do you have specifics for the 4 areas, the 4 federal performance measures? I know they give an 80, 90, whatever. Do you know what St. Croix is specifically for each of the 4 areas?
I do have that information. I know that we were approximately 81% in current support collections. We were almost 118% in paternity establishment, and that's a little complicated formula. That's why we're over 100%. We're just over 80% for arrears collection, which is the hardest performance area to meet. And the final area was, let's see, court order establishment, we're almost at 96%.
Okay. Thank you.
But I can give that to you specifically, and I surely will talk to you about contacting me. We have several phone numbers, we have an email address, and I was out of the office on vacation, so I don't know if that's when you tried to contact me.
Other questions? Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thanks.
Next one will be the District Attorney's report. District Attorney Carl Anderson.
Good morning. I'll try to be brief too, as you all got the annual report. We've had no change in our number of people in our office. We have 23. 2 of those are part-time. 8 total lawyers. 7 of those are state employees, including myself. One big thing we did was we had a big change to our diversion program. We made changes to make it more in line with Wisconsin best practices published by DOJ. We had the TAD grant has been submitted for the competitive cycle, so we're hoping we get that again because that's a significant amount of money for the county. We're pretty much in line where we should be with our budget and our revenue, though we're still waiting for DOJ. We expect about $136,000 from them. If you're wondering why the total revenue is lower than anticipated, that's why. We filed so far, or as of the middle, November 15th, over 2,800 criminal cases. So it's a lot. Some of the concerns are with the changes to diversion, it's a lot more work for our 2.5 diversion staff. I might be asking for another staff member for the diversion program next year. We also are due for, I think, a legal assistant and have been for a while. It's been since 2004 that we've had another legal assistant. There's more details, more numbers on the breakdown between felonies and misdemeanors, number of cases you can look at in the packet, but if there's any questions.
No questions, but just to ruin a surprise for probably Susan Caparelli, but she texted me this morning that we did receive the TAD grant.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
Good news.
So, same dollar amount as we previously had. So.
All right, good news. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Any other questions? Thank you. Before we start on the last item here, Cindy will be passing around a sheet if anybody wishes to send Supervisor PV well wishes. Next item will be medical examiner's report. Patty Shatner.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm sure you were just totally enthralled with my annual report. It was always robust and exciting. To start with, our program coordinator position is still open. We're reevaluating, and we're going to be taking applications again. We did have kind of a interesting blip this week. Some of our hospice agencies were in quarantine and could not respond to hospice deaths. So we had to coordinate with law enforcement to figure out how we were going to do that, because that is something that is mandated, that a hospice nurse has to be there. So we were able to figure it out and get it done and seamlessly, so we were very proud of that there. Our CAT scan machine program looks to be up and running by the first quarter, which is very exciting. We have lots of partners that are really stepping up and very excited about this coming our way. We looked at, we're 45 cases ahead of last year, so we should be at about 850 is kind of what we're thinking our caseload is going to be this year. With our aging population, we knew that this here was coming, and it's just going to continue to grow, which really taxes our department. With that, we had 37 autopsies. Of those, 20 were natural deaths, 5 were suicidal investigations, and 8 were accidents. Our suicides are now up over the last 2 years. We are now at 13 suicides. We are the 3rd year running where it's only men. So this is obviously something that we need to address as far as public health and addiction and mental health and well-being as to why in St. Croix County are only men dying by suicide. Our accidental deaths, the thing that is probably the most interesting is the fact that 8 of our accidental deaths were senior citizens who died due to falls at home. So this, from a prevention strategy, this is really talking a lot about partnering with safe floors, safe steps, safe shoes, because these falls, these are people who are living independently. And even though they're part of the elderly population, when they fall, it can be devastating. So that was, it's outpaced all our other accidental deaths. So this too is probably something that will continue. We had 4 drug overdoses, 1 alcohol-related death. We had a tree cutting accident, and we had a gravestone that fell on a child. This death was one that is actually a national trend that's happening with our cemeteries. Our cemeteries are full of very old gravestones that are not being maintained. And this was the first time this happened in St. Croix County, but we do have a lot of old cemeteries with a lot of really tall gravestones. So that type of maintenance is something that is really something we should be looking at. And the reason probably nobody heard about it is because it wasn't someone who lived here. It was someone whose family came to one of our local cemeteries to visit a family plot, and the gravestone of someone else's family fell on this child. Our child death review panel will be looking over 3 different child deaths this year under the age of 18. One is a suicide, one is an accidental death, and one is a natural death. Moving forward, as we look at how St. Croix County is growing, the CASCAN project is going to be a really big part of what we're doing for the next year or so in really implementing it. But we do have a need, and I did include in my budget an additional cooler 3-up. But I do think that as we move forward, we are going to have to start thinking about having a walk-in cooler space. The last weekend in St. Croix County, we had 12 deaths. The weekend before, we had 15. Our funeral homes do not have the capacity. While I was here today, I signed 3 cremation releases from deaths that were last week. So we're starting to see this need for storage. We only have 1 funeral home in St. Croix County that actually has cooler space for 3. Another funeral home is building a cooler space for 3, but that will not meet the capacity of what we need. So, and if you did read my report, you'll see that we are working right now with 85 different funeral homes throughout the area. So the need for storage is really huge. And really, as a society, how we treat our dead is how we're judged. And our dead are treated with dignity and respect, and we always maintain the fact that they are cared for. Right now, as we're speaking, our cooler is full. Families are trying to make those decisions on what they need to do with their loved ones. So just to be aware that we will try again to go for ARPA funding for cooler space, and also probably another 3-up. Any questions on this invigorating conversation?
Supervisor Hall.
Yes, Ms. Schogner, thank you very much. I have some general questions around the suicide issue.
Yes.
Where do we stand in relationship with, the rest of the state in terms of our rates or nationally? And then secondly, I've heard talk, that there seems to be it runs in streaks, or there's an epidemiological type of approach to suicides where it triggers other people. Are we seeing that? And then how can we as a county reach out better for that?
Those are all really good questions. The suicide rate of what we're seeing now in the changing really is this switch to men are at a much higher rate in risk. And it really comes down to trying to figure out how to educate men better on mental health issues and getting the help that they need. Pretty much everyone that we are dealing with is not accessing the cares that are available. It's not that we don't have the services. We do have the services in St. Croix County. It's important for people to access those services. And especially with younger men under, well, anyone under the age of 40 is really young for me. But for younger men, they might not have life or health insurance. Coping abilities are really less because they're just is under high stress. There's also a element we're seeing with diagnoses of ADD and ADHD, which then goes more into the impulsivity of the act. It all comes down to the lethality. We have a much higher rate of suicide by gun, and that is accessibility, and it's more lethal because most people who die by suicide don't want to die. What they want to do is take care of the pain that's inflicted on them at that moment. So it really is incumbent on all of us to do a better job of saying, go to your doctor, find a counselor, find that person that can help talk them down and talk them out. Because these numbers they're not the worst that we've had in St. Croix County, but they are increasing. What is alarming is that it's all men for 3 years running. That is something that everybody in healthcare should be really looking at. Why is that the issue?
Supervisor Counter.
Out of the, I think you said 13 suicides for men. Do you have any knowledge as far as if any of them were prior military or military?
Yes, we did have 2 veteran suicides this year. Both were young men. So, and we are working with Veteran Services, and I'm also working with Veteran Services out of Minneapolis. So we're trying to get the word out, but again, like everything else, we need other people, and especially community leaders, to step up and really talk about mental health, and that we do have some resources for people who think that they don't have resources. We just have to get the word out.
Supervisor Hanson.
What's your biggest need area right now?
Biggest need?
Yeah.
I think right now our biggest need is really getting the CAT scan machine up and running. It's really going to be a resource. It's going to make things a little bit more flexible for us. The time going back and forth to St. Paul takes up a lot of time, not only for us, but funeral homes and law enforcement. So that piece alone, giving us more time to work with our families, is really going to be really good. So we're looking forward to that. And this time of the year, families call on a daily basis for resources dealing with their grieving process. So, we're looking to hire some more investigators. We're looking after the first of the year. We're kind of changing things. We looked at how to revamp our job description, looking at what's the trend nationally, and really the biggest thing that we've seen was the capacity and ability to facilitate a lift of over 350 pounds. So, and for us, we go out in a team of one. There's just one of us. Our cot weighs 126 pounds. Add to that a 250 to a 400 to a 500 to a 700 pound person. We have to facilitate that. Bring them back to our station. We have to facilitate how are we going to get them into our cooler. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and the fact that you don't hear about it means that we're doing a good job. So, we're doing the best we can with what we have. We are so grateful to the county board for, giving us the resources to deal with the special circumstances that happen here in St. Croix County. And as we have more and more of these deaths, every one of us are very passionate about the work that we do. So we're all very grateful for you guys.
Supervisor Thompson.
This is more of a statement rather than a question, but given that we have a large population of, the census told us that we have more people moving in who are of that more retirement age. We have people moving out who are of that 20s to 30s age, combined with the fact that we have a lot of aging baby boomers. I foresee that we as a board are going to need to look at investing more into the ME's office, because this business is only going to increase, and increasing numbers means increasing needs. And if we're going to say that we're treating our elderly and our dead with compassion and respect and dignity, then we're going to have to put dollars towards that to help out the ME's office.
I mean, thank you for bringing that up. One of the things that's new to St. Croix County that we haven't seen before is our unclaimed. You know, there's a big difference between unidentified and unclaimed. And that plays right into people, elderly people moving here, or people who have lived here forever that have nobody. They have no people. They have no relation tied. So right now in my office, I have 6 sets of unclaimed remains. So I'm partnering with the Richmond Rotary. I'm going to be meeting with the Hudson Rotary and the Kiwanis Club to work on a compassion project to help get these folks buried. It's not that they're people, they know that they're here. They just have left them. So that this year in the United States, over 1 million bodies have been left unclaimed. So that says a lot about, you know, our ability and capacity to deal with people, and how easy and how inconvenient death has become. So having the ability to be able to bury these remains in a respectful manner is really important, and that is written in statute that it is the county's responsibility. So I'm working on that project, and I think we'll be able to do it in a good way, because these are all people that lived in our area.
Supervisor Tollinger?
I was just going to ask you about that, and have you come to a resolution using the cemetery out there?
Yes, so we've been doing a lot of research on that little cemetery on on North 4th Street. We are going to be able to, I'm not a cemetery person, but you know, you have to have them all labeled, and I've been out to that cemetery 10 times, and right now they're just numbered and the records aren't really well kept. But here moving forward, I think what we'll do is we'll number them, and then we'll probably find volunteers to help us dig the spots for the cremains, and then bury them and identify them that way. Probably have some sort of service for unclaimed, where people can come and at least acknowledge that they were existing members of our community. Because all of them were people who lived here. They lived here, they worked here, they were part of our community.
I guess I lied. I do have one more, but I didn't know it. How long will it be before the CAT scan is working to lessen your loads? I mean, it might have been in here,
I'm
but-
hoping, Jim's not here, or Jim. Come on.
So to build a room, you need drawings. To get drawings, you work with an architect. To go out and get prices, so on and so forth, all this takes time. Problem we're having is getting electrical boxes in. The building is the old electric from when St. Croix Industries was there, and it needed to go away. So I'm in the process of upgrading that electrical panels. It has to be done before we can get the building built, build the room. And that is looking to be out another couple months before we can get the panels just to rebuild, so that we can take off of that to plug a regular plug into the wall. It's going to be probably, in my words, I'm thinking it's going to be April or May before we're actually done with it. We'll be going out to bid right after the first of the year, hopefully. But again, it's the electrical. I got to get the old panels out and upgrade that so that we can put the new stuff in. So it's real easy. In fact, I told her it's real easy to send a PO and buy something. But it takes forever to get something done. You got to do it the right way. So that's
how long.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Yep. That concludes our business items and reports, so any requests for future agenda items? Supervisor Cook, I think your request is already
My
in.
request has already been heard, sounds like. Thank you.
Others? Supervisor Artino?
I was wondering, with the report on COVID, and I didn't look at, I knew I was going to get the presentation on Wisconsin. I looked at Minnesota numbers, and they're probably equally as horrendous. Are we looking at going back to Zoom for our meetings?
So in order for that to happen, you would have to request a future agenda item for one of two things. One is to declare emergency powers for the county administrator, who could then implement remote meeting attendance for the county board, or you'd request a modification of the county board rules so that you could change the rules yourself to allow for Zoom attendance to meetings. Those would be one of the two things, though, that would, actions that the county board would have to take in order to have that happen.
Then I'd like to propose to make that motion.
Do you have a preference on which?
I can, for future, for future motion.
Yeah,
right?
so which avenue would you like to
It's
take?
going to take 2 meetings then, am I right? The next one for the motion.
Yeah, either one of them would go to the administration committee and then to the county board in January
Okay.
for action, unless the county board wanted to call a special county board meeting at some point in time.
Okay. You can ask for a special meeting. You can ask for that.
So I'll refer that to the administration committee to be
I
covered.
think in light of the fact that it's going to take that long, can we have a special meeting to put this to an earlier date?
Mr. Chair,
There's a
I'd add
lot
my
of
voice to
people-
that.
There's a lot of people here wearing masks and
I don't think I'm inclined to do that right now, but Supervisor Hanson, did you have a comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd add my voice to that. If it takes 2 supervisors to request that, I'd agree with that. When I got sick, before I knew I was sick, I had contact with 4 people in this building who I know were also sick. I got it from somebody or I gave it to somebody for, I think a Zoom meeting would be a really good option we need to discuss. And I do think it's an emergency.
Well, I think in order to have a special meeting, you need a majority of the board supervisors to, or the chair can call one in lieu of having a petition. So.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to poll the supervisors, all those in favor of having a special meeting to address this. Raise your hands. Cindy, you want to count there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. Okay, and those who are not, then just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it carries. We'll have a special meeting coming up. I guess we'll have to figure out a date for that before Christmas. Yeah.
Next week, maybe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The special meeting will be Monday at 4 p.m. Any other agenda item requests? None? Okay. County clerk's report?
Thank you. I have no correspondence to report on, but I just want to announce that I do have candidacy packets here, and they're also in my office, and they're also available online. Filing deadline is January 4th at 5 p.m. Minimum of 20 signatures, maximum of 100 signatures. All documents must be filed by the deadline in order to get on the ballot. Also, we're required to list the candidacy filings and the non-candidacy filings on our website, and they're out there. So you can go out there and look to see who has filed their intent. No one has completed their filing yet, and who's filed the non-candidacy form. And the deadline for the non-candidacy form is December 24th. The building is closed. So I will be sending a communication out to all of you about that, and making myself available for anyone who wants to wait till the last minute to file
So
it.
in other words, get them in by the 23rd.
And the building is closed on the 23rd. 23rd and 24th.
Or get them in by the 22nd.
Yes, the building, we're closed the 23rd and 24th. Because of the holiday, the way it falls. Yeah. So, anyway, WCA also provides calendars. These are wonderful calendars for county board members. I have a bunch up here if you want to pick some up. Pick them up. They're here for you, and that's
Are you feeling
all I
today,
have.
Ken? I'm just not feeling it.
Any questions?
No questions? Okay. Announcements? None? No announcements either. No announcements either. So at this time, I adjourn the meeting 11:21.